Good morning and welcome to today's Instagram Live. Got a bit of a different one for you today. Got one of the most considered minds in the game of golf, Mike CLAYTON, who has just joined us. So hopefully he'll be joining us very, very shortly. That's very quick off the mark, Mike. Who's going to be on course design, actually a subject which very few of us know an awful lot about. So to have someone of Mike's status come on with us this morning is very exciting. Really looking forward to learning an awful lot today. And about the ways that we should all be looking at our golf courses when we play them. So hopefully he'll be appearing in the bottom half of the screen very, very shortly. So it's a little bit of an early one today because obviously Mike's down in Australia. Good morning.
Good evening. Does work.
So you almost look as surprised as Tony Johnson did when he saw himself in the bottom half of the screen.
Yeah, well, I know, and I'm actually getting a haircut on Saturday. My God, it's been months.
It's
horrendous.
Yeah, my wife gave me she said, "You're not having your hair covering your ears on Instagram." So she gave me a light trim yesterday. So how have you been keeping?
Good, really. We've got a beach house down the road from Sanders Beach Golf Course, so it's been we haven't played for 8 weeks, but they opened up last Wednesday, and so we've been walking on the beach and kind of just hanging around like everyone else, it seems.
Yeah. No, fortunately we got started playing golf again on Wednesday, and I've managed to get out a couple of times, and thankfully the weather's been kind to us as well. So the courses have opened up, and it's amazing what 7 weeks of rest does for a golf course.
Yeah, they've been good here. The funny thing was the last 5 Saturdays were just horrendous. Really? Couldn't have played golf, they were so bad. And of course this Saturday was perfect. So
yeah, lovely. So as I do with everyone that we have on, I give a little bit of a précis just to give people a background about yourself. I was born and raised in Melbourne, and still live in Melbourne now, I believe. I had quite an amateur career, winning the 77 Victorian Amateur as well as an 81, 78 Australian Amateur, 81 Dutch Amateur, 81 Riversdale Cup, turned pro in 81, and played on tour from 82 through to, I believe, 2000, and then on to Seniors Tour. If I'm correct, never lost your playing status, which is quite some achievement.
No, I did I lost my card in 1996. We started the design business in 1995, and I played pretty well. I played well in 94, okay in 95. 96, I was like terrible. And I was 40, so that's it. I'm going home to work. So I came home and worked, which I actually would have liked to play longer, really. I think when I'd watched kind of guys like Ubayoki and Bernard Gallagher really get into their 40s and really struggle, and I thought, well, that's kind of it. 40 is kind of a good age, but I'd have liked to have played a few more years. And I think now, if you're still keen and you stay fit, you can keep playing. But anyway, it was what it was. So I had 15 good years over there. I enjoyed it.
With you mentioned sort of starting the design in 95, did you find actually playing, did that make you play differently as you started to get more into the design side of things, actually kind of look at the courses you were playing and actually sort of thinking more about how they're designed than how you score?
Well, I often wondered if it was a coincidence that we started the business one year and I lost my card the next. I was not playing well, but I always got annoyed at playing bad courses. Just kind of, because I'd grown up in Melbourne where, and Jeff Ogilvy said the same thing, where we'd watched every tournament that ever came to Melbourne, Kingston Heath, Metro, Victoria, Royal Melbourne, on all the best courses. When I first went to Europe, I soon discovered that tournaments didn't necessarily go to the places that had the best courses. They went to the places that were the most commercially viable. So I got used early on to not playing great courses every week. Having said that, we did play a lot of tremendous courses in Europe. With Chantilly and Portmarnock, Sunningdale, Royal Birkdale. There were lots of tremendous courses we played over there.
Yeah. And because I think I find it the same with sort of amateur golf turning into sort of the lower level pro golf here. You start play all these wonderful. I mean, we're sport rotten here in Surrey, with St George's Hill and Sunningdale and Wentworth and the Berkshire all close by, Swindley Forest. Got some amazing courses here, and then you turn pro and go and play a hotel course that's just been stuck there, and yes, you go from the sublime to the ridiculous very quickly.
Yeah, Lucas Michel's a friend of mine, the kid who won the US Mid Amateur. He plays at Metro, I play, and he's obviously in the Masters and the US Open, and he does some work with me as a golf course design nut. And said, Lucas, if you want to play great courses, don't turn pro. You can play great golf courses the rest of your life as an amateur. And but turn pro and you'll soon find that it's not about the architecture, it's about, which is why that match this morning, as dull as the golf was, because we've seen those guys play a lot, it was so interesting to watch the golf course, to see the golf course. You just don't ever see some of them. You can look at it on Google Earth, but you don't, I've never played that course. I'd love to play it, but you don't ever see it. So that was why.
Well, that's something I was going to bring up with you, saying the Seminole, it's got the Walker Cup next year, but it's a course that's never featured anywhere and is a real, so highly regarded, a Donald Ross classic. But until you actually get, even from the TV cameras, it's hard to really see it in its full glory. But everyone who plays it raves about it, and actually it's a bit of a shame it had been such bad weather prior to yesterday. It's been horrendous weather there, so it was playing softer.
Well, it was so soft, and it seemed like, it came on at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I was kind of going in and out of sleep a little bit, but it seemed like there were lots of drives and wedges on the par 4. So, and I'm sure the members don't care about that because it's a members course, but it was great to watch. And it was, I think the most, but I'm not sure if you listened to Rory on the McKellar podcast last week, but he spoke about the first time he seriously watched the President's Cup was at Royal Melbourne last year, when it was a brilliant tournament. It just shows to me the importance of pro golf trying to go to as good a course as it can every week it can. And that's not always possible, but there's so much to be said about taking the best players in the world to the best courses. So the Australian Open's at Kingston Heath this year, which will be tremendous. It's such a compelling place to watch guys play golf.
And I guess that's just going to lead into a question I was going to ask you a bit later on, but seeing as we're on that now, is actually what makes a great course or a great design? What are the really key things what are the most important aspects of a design that makes it that great? And actually now, as a sort of a lead off to that, is it very hard now when you take the real classic courses, like take Merion for example, are they ever going to go back there on tour, and are they relevant to the tour now?
Is Merion relevant to the tour? Not unless it's covered in long grass. And then it's not the course it should be.
Yeah.
So, I think Merion's an amazing course. I couldn't believe how good it was the first time I played there. I haven't seen it since Gil redid it, but seems like it's since David Graham won, spent the last 30 or 40 years almost, or 30 years between that and 2013, trying to prove it's relevant for the best players in the world, where it's kind of a lost cause. Such a great course. So it's got to prove itself as relevant by being difficult, which means smothering it in long grass. And that would be a much better golf course if it was wide open and cut like Kingston Heath or Sunningdale. But then it would be too easy. Yeah. Because then you could drive it, there's more room off the tee, and there's, you've got short grass around the greens instead of long grass. And that classic shot that Justin Rose at the last green didn't finish up on the green as good as that shot was. Yeah. But it's such an amazing course. So, and it's unusual. Most US Open courses are massive, big properties, and Torrey Pines aside, which is not that interesting, they mostly go to fantastic golf courses for the US Open. But what makes a great course? Well, great land, great architecture, great land and great architecture, really. It's hard to build a great course on a dull piece of land, but Kingston Heath's the classic, a top 50, 25 to 50 course in the world, built on a not very good piece of land, but sand, beautiful sand, and great indigenous vegetation. And it had the good fortune of Dan Suter, who came out from Carnoustie, laid it out, and then Mackenzie came out and bunkered it. And so given a decent piece of land, which I guess is all you would call Kingston Heath, but a bed of sand and two great architects, and you finish up with a great golf course. But, look at Sunningdale, Birkdale, Dornoch, Brora, Ganton, they're all on really interesting pieces of land.
And is it the flow of the land, the natural landscape is going to be key, because that gives you your kind of your framework to work from? And I guess during the 80s, 90s, there was a lot of land moving, and so creation of particularly in the US, actually, I mean here in the 90s, a lot of poor pieces of land that just had a lot of dumper trucks and things shifting land to create slopes and things. But is it now hard to find such good sites?
Well, it's hard to find good sites where people live, but the most interesting and the great part of the golf development of the last, well, not since 1993, what's that? So almost 30 years was Dick Youngscap taking a shot at Sandhills, which anyone who's been to Sandhills knows it's almost literally in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town's 20 miles away with 404 people in it, or that last count. And the next closest town's 80 miles away. So it's in the middle of Nebraska, but incredible sand dunes. And Dick Youngscap went out there and took a shot on, I think he bought 8,000 acres. And he had to buy more land. It was a funny story about Bill and Ben went out and routed the golf course and decided that for perfect routing, it needed more land to build what are now the 14th and 15th holes. And Bill said to Ben, he said, Ben, you're going to have to be the guy to go to Dick and tell him he needs to buy more land, having already bought 8,000 acres. But that was the first great, and it cost almost nothing to build. You know, the land, you can buy 8,000 acres in the middle of Nebraska for not much at all. And the course, I don't know what the course cost to build, but it was less than a couple of $1 million. So Dick Youngscap did that. Mike Kaiser invested in it. And without that, I doubt we'd have seen Bandon Dunes. Because Kaiser tried the same thing. He went out there to the middle of nowhere. He said, everyone told me I was crazy. Everyone told me I was crazy. And he built Bandon Dunes. And his wife told me, she said, I thought I'd let him build one course just to get it out of his system. The problem is the more courses he builds now, the more money we make. So, yeah, he's at Sand Valley now. And so Bandon got done. And because Bandon got done, Barnbougle got done. Because Mike came down to Barnbougle, took Richard Sattler, the owner of Barnbougle, showed him Bandon, said, this is how it works. So Richard took a shot at Barnbougle. So places like Castle Stewart got built. Sand Valley's getting done. Nova Scotia.
Stream Song's probably another one that's similar.
Stream Song. So there's been a lot of great golf built in the last 25, 30 years. The irony is that it's also been incredibly cheap to build. So when I was playing in Europe in the 90s, we played Coventry Park, and I always get it mixed up. Is it East Sussex or West Sussex?
East Sussex.
East Sussex, right? Yeah. You know, the London Club, Weasley, all those places got built. So they hired the famous American designers of the 80s, and they built that kind of. And what always amazed me was that here was probably the one country in the world England with the greatest collection of diverse golf courses in the world, and they were building these faux kind of American things that were in fashion at the time. It always struck me as kind of bizarre when you would, you know. But anyway, that was. We played quite a few tour events there. The Oxford here was another one. You know, so
this is the stadium course style, aren't they? Where they're all built up on the sides and
But you know, since I've been up, you know, I've played Queenwood and Beaverbrook, and I like them. Now, Beaverbrook's not a great piece of land, but pretty good. And I really like that course. It's probably a little polarising, but I really liked it. I think it's good. So.
Because is that what you call? I mean, there's a sort of term of minimalistic design, so coming back in, where now you're using them, trying to find great sites rather than creating courses. You're kind of using would that be fair to say the minimalistic design, the sort of like Gil Hance, yourself, Tom Doak, you guys all kind of going more down that route, because obviously when you've got a decent platform to start from, it's a lot easier to create something that lasts. Yeah,
although you wouldn't call Barnbougle. I mean, people might call that a kind of natural course that's laid over the land. But I don't know how many people who are listening have been there. But if you've seen the first tee shot at Barnbougle, it was completely blind. There was a massive sand dune, 60 yards in front of the tee, 60 feet in the air. And Tom just said, we'll just blow it up. Brian Schneider sat in a bulldozer for 4 days and just got rid of it. So a lot of that movement, for me, it's about, there was so much mounding done. It was this kind of fake stadium, kind of what we were seeing on TV from America sort of work. When, I think Tom, Doak and Gill and those guys, Bill Core, they more got into uncluttering golf courses. So when they worked on old courses, so much of the work was peeling back the trees, fixing the mowing lines, uncluttering them. So much of the work was done in Australia. The first thing you do is just get rid of the clutter. And most of the great courses in Australia were done in the 20s. So we had 60 years of an accumulation of committee-inspired improvements, in inverted commas. So what could be bad about planting trees? And we need ball washers, and we need paths for the buggies, and we need more rubbish bins, and the first tee would look nice if we put a flower bed around it. So that's all kind of anti. We're all anti that sort of stuff. So unclutter the golf course as much as being minimal about it, I think. But
they mentioned that about Seminole last night, saying that I think was it Core Crenshaw went in and done the work at Seminole, and it's similar to Pinehurst, where if I understand it right, it's getting the waste area, I guess is a wording for it, but the bunkering and the side of the fairway, rather than having fairway rough and then the sand, to kind of blend it to the edge of the fairway and make it more natural.
Well, that was I saw obviously Seminole on TV this morning, but I played Pinehurst after they did it, and I'd watched it on TV when Payne Stewart made that great par in 1990. That drive would be on the fairway now. And what would have been more interesting would be to have seen, can Payne Stewart take a 4-iron out and knock it on the green and 2-putt to win the US Open? Instead, he hits a kind of a boring wedge, and he makes a great putt. But I much rather would have seen him hit the 4-iron, but when you're in 4-inch grass, you can't do that. So Bill and Ben peeled that thing back. They just got back to this, widened the fairways out and got back to the sand. And it's a much more interesting golf course to play.
Yeah.
But it was really the way Donald Ross wanted it to look. But so much of American golf got into the bowling alley stuff of 30-yard wide fairways, grow the rough, hit the ball straight, and punish with equity the bad shots. So everyone who misses, so every player who drove the ball where Payne Stewart drove it that day got the same lie, had to play the same shot. Whereas if you play that shot at Royal Melbourne or Sanedale, you might get the lie he got and you have to gouge it out with a wedge. You might get a flyer lie where you're liable to hit it 30 yards over the green, or you might get a perfect lie when you can hit a great shot. So the thing that's great about golf is its inherent unfairness.
Yeah.
And the challenge is dealing with that. Whereas if you just penalise everyone the same, it's just dull and boring and predictable. And Payne's par was memorable because he made a great putt, but to me it would have been more memorable if he stood there and hit a great 4-iron on the green, which is what Justin Rose did at Merion, and Hogan did at Merion, and Fowler did at Muirfield a couple of times, and they're the shots that are memorable.
I guess when you're taking a renovation of what's meant to be a classic course, is it a bit of a poison chalice? Because there's always going to be some people who say, oh, it was much better as it was, or you shouldn't have done that, or you should have done this. Is it obviously exciting to take a course that gets you interested as well, but how difficult is it making the balance between, or is it a difficult balance to honour the traditions of the course but they're trying to keep it relevant to modern styles or the modern equipment, for example?
Well, that's a kind of different question, but the first job we got was Victoria, which was Peter Thompson's club right next to Royal Melbourne. Jeff Ogilvie was a member there. Really good course, really good sandbelt course. But the first meeting we went to in 1995, there was an old black and white photo on the wall of the downstairs bar. We took it upstairs to the committee meeting, and none of them had really looked at it. It was an incredible photo. We said, we think we should put this back. Look at this thing, it's incredible. And in the intervening years from 1935 to it probably started after the war. So from 1950, say, to they'd kind of done their worst by 1985.
Yeah. They'd
filled bunkers in, either filled them in completely and planted trees where the bunkers were. They'd certainly reduced the size of nearly all of them. And they planted trees in other places that were, for whatever reason, who knows, but no one's complaining when people are filling bunkers in and planting trees. But if you go and reverse it, you start putting the bunkers back and chopping the trees down, then, well, you're going to upset a big chunk of the membership. But 25 years on, when the course reopened, we redid the greens last year, so that was the final part of the restoration, really. I mean, restoration in part, redesign in other parts, but certainly the work we've done on the golf course. There's not a member there who wouldn't agree that it was a much better golf course than it was in 1995, but you fight your battles along the way. I mean, it took us 20 years to get the trees out down the right of the 11th hole, which were just, I mean, I had Bill Course down there, Gil Hans, Tom Doak, Mike DeVries, all stood there and said, well, you're almost there. And 20 years it took before we got it was a crazy row of trees down the right. And once they came out, I mean, 3 or 4 years later, everyone, wow, yeah, it's much better. Well, it was obvious. I mean, you wasted 20 years. It was obvious it was going to be better with those trees gone. But you fight your battles. There are battles you lose to win the war in the end. But, a lot of it's about going back to the old photos and taking it back to what they were. Because the guys who built those courses, I mean, Royal Melbourne wanted Harry Colt to come out and redo the course they had.
Yeah.
He didn't want to come out. He said, take Mackenzie, he'll come and do it. So Mackenzie came out and transformed golf in Australia with Mick Morcom and Alec Russell were the two kind of local guys he'd worked with. So, Mackenzie left, Russell died, Morcom died. The war came and went. The 50s and 60s were on us. So people realised that it was a peculiarly Australian problem, but unsurprisingly, when the English came here, they thought it was a pretty dark and dusty, shitty place, pretty hot and dry and miserable and not much like where they'd come from. So they naturally imported European trees.
Right.
And we'd figured out by 1960 that wasn't a great idea. But then there was the fad in Australia of native trees. So Perth is about as far from Melbourne as Moscow is from London. But because it was a native tree, something in Perth was deemed to be okay to plant in Melbourne. Where was it? Or something from New South Wales was even further from Perth, was okay to plant in Perth. So we made that mistake. So only now, and it was a war we've fought for 25 years. Let's go back to what grew here. What was growing here before there was a golf course here? So everyone would agree that, if I stood in front of 300 members and I said, hands up who doesn't think the golf course should feel natural? No one puts their hand up. But the surest way to make a golf course feel unnatural is to plant stuff on it that doesn't belong. No surer way to...
I believe you made a comment in an interview saying trees have no place on a golf course, I believe, as a statement. I guess it's particular to particular places, but it's...
Well, that was Alistair Cook and Bobby Jones sitting on the 10th tee at Augusta, and Cook was lamenting the state of a course somewhere, and Jones, as he looked down that incredible corridor that goes down the 10th hole Augusta, and he said, I don't see any need for a tree on a golf course. And St Andrews proves that you don't need trees to be part of golf, which is not to say you get rid of all the trees. Once golf migrated inland and away from the shore, and trees became a beautiful part of inland golf. Just as Colt said, keep them off the stage. Part of the scenery, but not part of the stage. And in Australia, we made a terrible job of planting out golf courses. So the war of the last 30 years has been rationalising trees and uncluttering golf courses, really.
So where's your... And if you're taking a design from scratch, one thing I've always wondered, where I play at St George's Hills, it was woodland, and there was there was no corridor of anything. There was just woodland, and I look at it and think, how in the hell did Colt see a golf course from that land? I mean, where do you start with some of the projects? What's your start point when you're looking at when you get a commission for a course? Where do you go from as a base point when you're starting designing a course?
Well, you can't see anything. You look at contour maps. But the courses we've done here, the new course, they've been on sites where you could walk them. And, as Bill Core says, you walk around and around and around until it feels like golf. And he did the second course at Barnbougle, Lost Farm. And one of the things he did there was to follow where the cows walked. Because the cows will find the walk of least resistance. So they weren't traipsing up and down over the sand dunes, but going around them. But you try and find things that look like holes. You try and figure out how it's going to fit. You try and find the best green sites. You try and find the things that most look like holes. You try and avoid the things that are going to take a massive amount of work to make them work. And often you've got to give up on a great hole to make a routing work.
Yeah.
So it's a massive trap to fall in love with with one or two amazing holes that you build at the expense of the rest of the golf course. Mm. So tying the whole thing together is the trick, really. And there's a pretty nice piece of land in Hobart that I've been looking at for years, a project that Matt Goggins involved in. And, we looked at that for, 15 years ago. We looked at it. It's covered in pine trees. And you don't see much. But if you walk through and you walk around often enough, you kind of get to figure out what you can do.
Okay.
That's an amazing piece of land where you can go in any direction and see any number of holes. But there are so many different sites. You've got, they're all different. But what was St George's Hill like when they first went there? Was it smothered in trees, or was it
literally
walkable?
smothered in trees. I mean, it's the irony that people say, it's a wonderful heathland. It's never seen a heath in its life. It's got some heather there, but literally the amount of trees that they felled to make the course. So it's really kind of surrounding the fairways. You've got, it's classic Colton. You've got some width to play with to give you some strategy, which we'll come and we'll discuss shortly. But and the merits of that. But you've then got it's now they're taking some of the trees out, but you've then got it's tree lined. It was, you look at some of the history books from the course, and it was just trees. But just the amazing sculpting, sculpting into nature, sculpted an amazing piece of land. It's like Sunningdale Old, some of the slopes and the rise and the fall of the land. It's just beautiful land.
Yeah, I've played there. But so was Sunningdale wasn't covered in trees when they built it, was it?
No, that's got the sort of heath element to it,
Yeah. And we used to live in Bagshot, and we would right on the edge of the M3 there, and I would... you could get across the M3 and run in the heathland out there, and it was you would run around there looking at the golf you could have built there was incredible, and you could see it all. It was amazing. It's a beautiful piece of land. So it wouldn't have been hard to figure out where to put the golf there. The trick is to find the best way to put the jigsaw together, really. So don't fall in love with one great hole, but how do you put this jigsaw together to make the most interesting and the most compelling golf, really?
Speaking of interesting, so the 7th hole par 3 at Barnbougle's just being voted, I believe, best par 3 in Australia.
Yeah.
So what makes that such a great hole?
Well, it's short, so everyone loves short holes. Short little holes, little tiny hole, 120 yards. So, but I've hit lots of 4-irons in there because it's nearly always straight into the wind. In fact, it's almost harder when it's downwind, because when it's downwind, it's a nightmare to try and hold the green with a wedge. But it was a green site that was just lying there. Brian Schneider built that green. Gouged out a bunker into the slope and smoothed it off and planted the grass. So it's a pretty hole because the water's in the background. Mm-hmm. It's small, so everyone can play it. You're dead in the bunker on the left, but there's a big bailout on the right. So it's an easy hole to make 4. And it's a fun shot to hit. Yeah. And it can.
Sorry.
And I think the wind makes it, because it can. If it was just a 9-iron shot, then it wouldn't be that interesting. But because it literally goes from a 4-iron to a wedge, then it plays so differently. Every time you go there, I've hit every club from a 4-iron to a sandwich into that hole, and there aren't many holes in the world where you do that.
It feels like a lot of the great courses, those that are deemed great designs, do have a short par 3. You take Merion, you take Pine Valley's got a fairly short par, so a 150-yard par 3. There are so many great courses that have. Take Troon, 11th of St Andrews, only 160 odd yards. They're
Yeah.
not. It's often those ones that are the ones that are that feel like they're the most revered of the par 3 holes on most great designs. Is that because it's a more accessible hole to more players? It's almost a more kind of fun hole to play.
I guess that's probably true, but Melbourne, the Sandbelt Melbourne's got probably the best group of 140 to 180 yard holes in the world. Certainly one of them, incredible holes. But the Heathlands have got the best collection of long par 3s, I think. I always get the blue course, the blue or the red, that great 10th hole and the 15 at Sanedale, and with that massive getting on the right, and 16 on the blue, I think. I always get the colours mixed up with the Berkshire. The 13th and the 17th at the Addington. So there are lots of great long par 3s in Britain. The 16th at Carnoustie is obviously a links hole, but I'm always amazed that you've got way many more great long par 3s than we have in Melbourne. But the short ones, everyone loves the short ones because everyone can play them. But there is no point to it. The problem with building them now is that we've done a few and they've turned out to be unpopular, because if people join a club that was built with a great, difficult, short hole, they join the club knowing that hole's there, so they know not to complain about it. If you build a severe 130-yard hole as a replacement hole for something else for whatever reason, and people struggle with it and can't play it, they'll go crazy about it. So one lesson we learned from making 2 holes like that with no bailout, really, you've just got to hit a good 9-iron shot.
Yeah.
Is that leave one side open. So the 7th at Barnbougle is a great little hole, because Tiger Woods can knock it in the left bunker and make 6 easily. Because the sand's deep, the ball buries, you can't get it out, or certainly you can make 5. But my mum can hit it along the ground out to the right and putt up on the green and make 4 all day. But there's got to be some element of double bogey around a 120-yard hole. Or certainly a bogey if you miss a shot. But, I mean, Tom Doak said it better than anyone. He said the great thing about a short 120-yard hole is that with one bad swing, a tour pro can make a bogey, and with one good swing, a 20 marker can make a birdie. And that's not true at the 16th at Carnoustie.
Yeah,
20 markers never going to make a birdie.
That's a brute,
never.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your kind of biggest course, I guess, what's your favourite course from a design, both playing and from a design point of view? And what would you say, are there any particular courses that you sort of would view as your kind of inspirations or your kind of benchmarks or blueprints as a sort of a example of the kind of things you try to achieve when you're designing yourself?
Well, I was a massive fan of Peter Thompson, who was a massive fan of the old course. So he always said that was the model on which everything else was copied, really. So that's the people who don't get that place just think it's famous because of the mystique, the town and the history and the things that have happened there. But it's got some of the best holes in the world there. 11, 12, 13, 14, maybe not 15 so much, 16 and 17 might be 6 of the best 20 holes in the world. I mean, they're incredible holes. So the type of golf that course asks you to play is the sort of golf that I like. It's not defined like Firestone is, to pick one example of a narrow course playing down bowling alley fairways where you just asked to hit the ball straight. You don't make any decisions. It's purely a test of execution. Whereas St Andrews is a test of thought and execution, and how you handle the good and bad luck about it. It's a quirky, so you can see people who don't like it or don't get it. You can bitch about something on every hole at St Andrews if you want. There's bound to be something crazy happen to you there. But how you deal with that craziness is the whole point of it. But it's got great holes, and the last hole is just an amazing place to finish.
Yeah.
So, and then Mackenzie came here, having written that it's the only first-class course in the world. There is no second-class course, and Cypress Point's a really bad third-class. he came down here and did Royal Melbourne, which is certainly my favourite course in Australia. I grew up on the other side of the city, but only half an hour, 40 minutes away. So I've played hundreds of rounds there and lots of tournaments there. And even, I figured out early on how great it was. I first played there in 1974. And I'd watched the World Cup there in 1972 where Tony Jackson played with Guy Hunt. There you go. Mm-hmm. And Tom Weiskopf played. Not a blind man, literally, but, anyone who doesn't, you don't need to know a lot about golf to go to Royal Melbourne and be in awe of what that place is and how to figure it out. It's really simple. It's a simple strategy, and but you've got to. It's why Seve loved playing there. Seve's the only guy to have won at the Old Course, Augusta, and Royal Melbourne as a pro. And Mackenzie, when he built those two courses, was trying to channel the sort of golf that he saw people playing at the Old Course with freedom. And if you hit the ball out of play or into the wrong part of the hole, Seve did an 84 in the Open there on the last 71st hole. He hit the ball way out of play. And rather than do what Payne Stewart had to do, to gouge it out, try and get up and down with a wedge, the course gave him a shot, gave him a 6-iron out of a fly lie to a tiny green from a terrible angle. But can you hit it? Can you do it? And he pulled off one of the great shots. So Mackenzie built Royal Melbourne and Augusta in that mould. So if you hit the ball out of place, you can still play the shot if you were good enough to play it. But if you screwed it up, then you were going to make 6. You're in the road hole bunker, on the road, or up against a wall, or wherever you were. But, in giving you the chance to make 4, he gave you the chance to make 6. Whereas Payne Stewart only had two numbers. It was only 4 and 5. You're never going to make 6. So Mackenzie channeled that inspiration he understood at St Andrews and built that sort of golf all around the world.
Is that really one of the keys to when you've designed a good golf hole, is because it gives the player, it's not just a case of, I've got to do this, I've got options, and it allows the player to make a decision, and then it's whether it's a good or bad decision and whether they can pull the shot off, rather than saying, this is your only option of playing it.
Yeah, I mean obviously, St Andrews doesn't have that much room. It's narrow, but the option is often to play down the other fairway. So I remember, I told this story the other day on a podcast. I was playing it was a 1990 Open, going down the 14th, and Steve Williams was, because Steve caddied for me there in 84. Okay. And I was going down the 14th. I hit my drive down there somewhere. I don't know where it was. And he was coming up the 5th with Floyd. And he walked past me, looked at me, and he said, just hit it down the 5th, and kept walking. So that kind of alleviated me of the need to make a decision about, do I try and rip it over the bunker, or where do I go? But, so there's such an amazing hole with so many ways to play it. You've just got to work it out for yourself. And same with, how do you play the 12th hole? How do you play 16? How do you manage that golf course? What do I do? Where do I go? And Royal Melbourne channels that same sort of thought process. How do I tackle this place? Well, and the sadness, going back to your 8 questions ago, was how do you deal with the equipment? Well, the Old Course deals with it in the Open by putting tees on other golf courses. Yeah. So the second tee's on the Himalayas, and the 9th tee's on the new course, and the 14th tee's on the Eden course, and the 17th tee's out of bounds. Yeah. So, the R&A have dealt with that problem by playing the Open on 4 or 5 golf courses. So I see finally they've come out with the one thing the virus has done is taken the heat off the R&A in the USA, because the biggest debate in the world before the virus was, what are we going to do about the golf ball? Yeah. And I'm putting my faith in them that they haven't lost heart to carry on with that fight. But as great as it was watching Tiger Woods play golf there in the President's Cup at Royal Melbourne, it was even more interesting watching Seve play there. And I watched him play. I was going to caddy for him in 1978 at the PGA, and I had to do an exam. which really annoys me still. But I watched Seve play pretty much every hole and it was watching Seve and Tiger play golf watching golf doesn't get any better than that. I mean, watching Hogan at Carnoustie, Nicklaus on the old course, Jones at Merriam winning the Grand Slam, but watching Seve and Tiger play Royal Melbourne. But it was more interesting when it was Seve playing with a persimmon and a blada than it was watching Tiger playing with a frying pan and a stone. But it was still great, but it just plays so much shorter. And I remember watching Seve hit 4 and 5 irons into the 11th hole, and it's a driver 9 iron now. So what's more interesting? That's what I don't get about these guys who think that everything's okay with how far the ball goes. Was it more interesting watching Seve hit 4 irons than Tiger hit 9 irons? And would it be more interesting watching Tiger hit 4 irons? I mean, I played with Lucas the other day, Lucas Michel, who we hit a drive somewhere. I can't remember what hole it was on, but the thing goes so far, in the end you can't see it. And people think that watching Greg and Jack and Watson and Weiskopf drive the ball because they only drove it 280 or 90 yards was chopped liver compared with Dustin Johnson hitting at 330. Well, it doesn't look any different. I mean, watching Weiskopf hit at 290 or 300 was just as awesome as watching Dustin hit it or Rory hit it at 330, except it's a whole lot harder.
I was going to say, is that
doing what they did?
A big challenge from a design point of view? If you were trying to design a course to take a tournament, is that do you have to make it now so big that it's just so costly, requires so much land, requires so much maintenance? Is it almost a sort of a... Has it got to the point it's just got ridiculous trying to design a course for these guys because they are now so athletically able and able to hit it so far?
Well, yeah, it is. The problem is they're not... I mean, the PGA building that new course out of Dallas. I see the PGA's there in 2000 and Gill's doing it 2027. But they're not building that many new golf courses now. Certainly not to hold golf tournaments. So you finish up with a driver wedge fest. So Dustin Johnson, was it 3 years ago? He took him until September. They hit more than a 7-iron shot into a par 4. So, it's just completely crazy. So a place like Royal Melbourne, we moved the tees back at Kingston Heath as far back as they can go. Almost can't go back any further. First tee's up against the clubhouse and the 17th tee's up against the back fence, and pretty much every hole's gone back as far as it can. And it's still not very long for those guys. Yeah. So what do you do? Well, I know I've tweeted it a few times. This in Mark McCormick's annual where he wrote about the 1969 US Open at Champions. One round, wasn't the last round. Arnold Palmer, who was pretty strong. Arnold was a big, long hitter. He was a ground shook when he hit. He averaged 4 irons into the greens, a four iron average. There might have been one wedge, 9 iron, and 7 iron, but it was mostly 2, 3, and 4 irons. He was strong. Yeah. That was a 7,000, maybe it might have been 7,100 yard golf course. So long for the time, but so to make a course where Rory McIlroy is averaging driver 4 iron, what's that? 600 yards long by 14.
4 iron's about 235, so
and his drives, so
350. So your best part of 600 yards, isn't it?
So that's 9,000 yards probably. So that's completely unsustainable. No one wants to play there. No one wants to watch it. No one wants to, no one wants golf to go there, except probably the manufacturers who, if you ask them on a dark and stormy night, they'll tell you, because it's always been their aim is to make the ball go further. Yeah. And if you said, "What's your limit?" you know that their dream is to make the ball go 400 yards. If a rocket scientist walked into the office of the boss of Titleist tomorrow and said, "I've figured out how we can make a legal ball go 400 yards," they're making it and they're selling it, and to hell with the consequences, because it's a company with shareholders and it's all about making money. They don't care about, that's not fair. I mean, they care about golf, but they don't care about golf like Ben Crenshaw cares about golf, or Jack Nicklaus, or Rory McIlroy, or Tom Doak, or they care about, because their job's to care about profit. but it's not their job to fight back and threaten the RNA and the USJ with suing them out of existence just so they can make the ball go further and further. Because at some point you've got to think that the people who run the game have got the best interest of the game at heart.
Yeah.
It's like the government in Australia and in Britain, I assume, well, the same thing happened, had the best interest of the lungs of the Australian and British people when they banned cigarette advertising. It cost us the Benson Hedges tournament, but it was a good decision. So the people who run the world, who make decisions, and clearly, cigarette smoking is a life and death thing. The golf ball is not a life and death thing, but I think it is to the game. And of course, it's not. The argument is, well, it's only 1% of the players, or not even. But there are. I mean, every kid who's competent now hits the ball 320 yards, and it's not going to change. And a place like Woking or Swinley Forest or St George's Hill wasn't. Its purpose wasn't to test the best players in the world, although they did at the time.
Yeah.
Sunningdale's was, but Sunningdale's are utterly irrelevant now in terms of testing the best players in the world. Is that a good thing for golf or a bad thing? Well, there's only one answer to that question. Is it a good thing is it a good thing for golf that the golf that Tiger Woods played at Royal Melbourne, as compelling as it was, doesn't resemble anything Mackenzie envisaged. He didn't see, the 17th hole on the East Course at Royal Melbourne, which I lose track of. It was a 4th on the composite course for the President's Cup. He didn't see guys hitting driver 300s on that green. Well, and that's actually not true because Alec Russell designed the hole, not Mackenzie. So that was a bad example. But the 12th on the West Course, which was a par 5 when they built it. Par 4 now, 3-wood wedge. It was a par 5 when Mackenzie did it.
Yeah.
So
it's not interesting to watch them. Just smashing driver and flipping wedges in. It's to golf holes to the greens that aren't designed to receive that kind of shot as well.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting watching Tiger play golf, but it would be more interesting if he was hitting a club closer to the club Mackenzie envisaged the best players in the world playing into that green. So how the game manages that, the question at the top level is, and the problem with the debate is that the people who don't think much about it assume that if you're taking 30 yards off Dustin Johnson, you're taking 30 yards off them, which you're not.
No, you're taking about 10.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So the question is, do you bifurcate the game, or do you come up with a ball that pull the ball back and take 10% off everyone? So I might lose 10 yards maybe.
Yeah.
But and of course the players that what we watched this morning, Rory did that podcast with Huggy and Lawrence last week, and Huggy joked about using persimmon woods, which would have been much more interesting. And it's going a bit far, John. I am sponsored by TaylorMade, said Rory. And but if you were Rory or Tiger, would you want the game to be more difficult to play? Of course you would, because they're the best players. So for the longest time, from 1960 really, when the best players started coming to Britain to play the Open, until this era, and still the Open does an amazing job of identifying the best player in the world. But for the longest time, you look through the guys who won that tournament in the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, it's always the best player in the world pretty much. Because to get around those courses in that weather with a persimmon driver and a Bellata ball, you had to really be able to play. Really play. And if you couldn't drive that ball through the wind with a persimmon wood, you had no chance to win the Open. No chance. And so the best players there were only 15 or 20 players who could win that championship because they were the only ones who could really drive the ball well through that wind. So I remember Seve, and I was not name dropping Seve, but or having a shot at Bernard Gallagher. But we were talking about Bernard Gallagher and careers, and he said, Bernard Gallagher won 20 tournaments. Anyone that wins 20 tournaments, that's a great career. He said, but he never really played well in the Open because he couldn't drive the ball properly. And he was a tremendous player. But Bernard would admit it, that when it came to nailing that persimmon drive, a ballada ball through the wind when you had to at Carnoustie and Muirfield and St Andrews and Troon and St George's, you really had to rip that driver. And now that skill is largely emasculated by how easy it is to, which is not to say the guys aren't great drivers, it's just a whole lot easier to do it.
Well, as when we were talking to Monty about it, he said when the metalwoods came out, he said that was the thing. Yeah, Greg was such a good driver, but all of a sudden they could do something similar to him. At that point, his advantage is not gone because he was still a great driver, and a great long hitter and a great player, but it kind of took away some of his edge and some of his great skill compared to the others. Well,
it took away all his edge, really, because there were lots of guys who were not with the 1 and 2 and 3 irons. So, but it certainly, there were lots of probably better middle and short iron players than Greg. But Greg's huge advantage was his driver. That set up every hole for him. So it took away more than just his edge. It was a massive edge he had, as did Jack, and all the great players had. Weisskopf, those guys, Tom Watson, they were great drivers of the ball.
Well, seeing as we've got about 10 minutes left, we do need to get on to what you're currently doing now. So with a mutual friend of ours, he set up in September last year with Mike DeVries, Frank Pont, CEP. The good side of this for us, hopefully, is that we're going to see more of your work in this side of the world. We've done a lot of work in Australia, and hopefully see a bit more of you over here.
That's the plan. I was going to be over. My plan was to come over there in the middle of May. We're working at the Addington and Royal Dublin. I was going to go to Wingfoot to Caddy for Lucas at the US Open, and then come back for the summer. So obviously we're not even allowed out of Australia. I'm not sure what the deal is over there, but we're not allowed out of Australia. So that's the end of that. So my plan is to do the same thing next year.
Yeah, the Addington must be a great, fun platform to look at. That's a course which everyone's hoped would get some real kind of love and care and attention at some point, because it's got some amazing holes and amazing land, real kind of fairly unique design. So that must be a really fun one to get your teeth into.
Yeah, that's an amazing project. It's such a great history, that place. And I saw a top 100 list, Golf World top 100 maybe. The Addington wasn't on it, which is kind of, one, it shows you how great the quality of golf in England is, but two, it can't be a great list if the Addington's not on it, because surely that's got to be one of the best 100 courses in. I'm not sure if it was England or Britain, but either way, it's such an amazing golf course that taking the greens back to where they, as with so many of those jobs, that was one of the first things we did at Victoria, was cut the greens back out to where they used to be. The greens, over 80 years of mowing, the greens had shrunk and the trees had got in the road.
Yeah.
So they're the first sort of order of business, the Addingtons, to rationalise the trees, get them out of the road of the golf, and cut the greens back out to where they used to be. But you're right, it's such an incredible piece of land, and so many unique holes. 16 and 13 and 12, and there were so many holes that you just don't see anywhere else in the world. 10, 9, 10. So just talking about great golf holes, going back to the earlier question, the great courses have holes that are unique, holes you don't see anywhere else in the world. You don't see a hole like the 7th at Sunningdale with that crazy tee shot, but that the amazing second shot, and a simple hole, but the 4th at Woking, and the 14th at Woking with who would build a green up against the clubhouse wall, pretty much. Those great holes at the Berkshire. So there are so many great, unique holes in Britain, and there are a bunch of them at the Addington. So my wife and I lived over there for pretty much 15 summers. So I never really, as much as I've been to America, I've obviously spent much more time in Europe, but as much time as I've spent in America, I never feel like I always feel like a foreigner in America for some reason, but I always feel at home in England. I've just always felt like flying to Sydney and flying to London never felt any different to me. I just can't get out of the plane at Heathrow and jump in the car, and I feel like I'm home. So I love it over there. So I'm really looking forward to spending.
And with Royal Dublin, is that am I right in saying is that bunker work? Is that predominantly?
It's a bunker work to start with. Yeah, it's a bunker work to start with. So.
And then again, with that, is that a case of looking at what was originally there, what's been changed, and kind of trying to
Yeah.
With things like bunkers, because they say a lot come and go over time because committees decide they're going to take one out or put one in. Or,
yeah. And they've changed some holes there. And ultimately, the question, if you're an architect, that Mike and Frank and I will ask is, how do you make this a better golf course? And there are always little things you can do to, make golf courses better. And so much more in America than Britain or Australia. So much of it's mowing lines in America. I just don't think they get rough over there. And people think Augusta's influential. Augusta has almost no influence over the mowing lines of the average American golf course.
Yeah.
We're cleaning up some work at Shady Oaks with the old business in Fort Worth, and we went there, and all the fairway bunkers were in the rough.
Mm-hmm.
There was the green, and I think the green, then two heights of rough or 2 heights of grass, then the bunkers, and these kind of rough over the backs of the greens with little paths cut to the tees. We said to the super, who was a tremendous guy and really good at what he did, the course is in great condition, get rid of all the rough around the fairway bunkers, one cutting height between the green and the bunkers, the green, all short grass in the backs of the greens to the next tees. And he did all that. So basically cut it like an Australian golf course.
Yeah.
We came back 6 months later, he said, wow, it's easier to cut, it's quicker to cut, it's cheaper to cut. I love the look of it. The members love it. It plays better. I said, why didn't I see it? It's so obvious. But it's such the courses that are cut to a formula in America are cut so formulaically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's much less of a problem here, and it's much less of a problem in England. But I remember going out to the 15th at Wentworth with John Paramore once, and to talk with him about that. This was before I even started the business. Why is this yard of no man's grass that was probably green when they built it? Well, how's it finished up like this? Well, nothing ever happened, but one of the great features of sandbelt golf is how the greens cut all the way to the bunkers.
Yeah.
And everyone who comes to Melbourne comments on that. And partly it's to do with the unique soil structure, but no reason why you can't even just have a 2 or 3 feet of really short grass that's not cut at green height, but just getting the bunkers back closer to the greens. And so mowing lines are important, but Gannington's a really cool course to just get it back to what it was, because when Abercrombie did that course, it was pretty amazing.
Well, we're getting right to the end of the hour now, so and it's getting late, well, late-ish where you are. You've been up very early this morning watching the golf. But I just want to say, thank you so much for joining us. It's
my pleasure.
I could sit and listen to you talk about golf courses for a long time, but we're going to run out of time in about 2 minutes. So I think we're really looking forward to seeing something like the Addington, seeing your project, seeing your work over here that much more, and getting to experience something like that when we'll know what a great kind of course it could be, seeing what it's going to turn into. We can't wait to see when you and Mike and Frank get your teeth into those projects.
It'll be great fun because Mike's amazing on a machine. So Mike builds all his own work and he's great at that. So it's really fun to be working with him. But I'll be over next year, so let's catch up and
be great.
Look forward to playing with all my friends over there and seeing my friends, and we'll catch up.
Well, I know that Mood says hello. I was going to get to ask you about that putt. But what I will say is anyone who doesn't know about that putt, Google Mike Clayton putt, and you'll see one of the things Mike's best known for. But just type in stupid golfer into Google. That's me. Well, so thank you so much for your time. Really grateful for it.
Pleasure. And it's been great fun.
And when you're over, please come over, and we'd love to take you around St George's Hill and just get your thoughts on golf generally. It's been great fun. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Tremendous. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.